for coming to today's Community Development Committee meeting on March 22nd. I will start off by taking roll. In the room, we have Councilman Hiram Jefferson, Councilman Wesley Hudson, and Councilman Cyril Jefferson, and I am Councilman Chris Williams. Johnson and Jefferson. So we will start first with the updates for the Homeless Service Guilford County Continuum of Care. I think we have Dr. Palmer and Brian online. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yep.
So, Brian, do you want me to start?
Yeah, why don't you start, Dr. Palmer, and then I can follow you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for having us here with you to give an update. As you know, I am the Guilford County Continuum of Care Board Chair, and our focus has been for the past year to collaborate and partner with the county, or at least in recent months, to partner with the county to assist in the continuum of care work by serving as the collaborative applicant on record. And so that process continues. The main thing I want to share with the group is that the job description that was created, or the job that was created and the job description have been agreed upon, has been disseminated, and the county has received applications and have set up interviews for the job. Brian, you don't have to remind me of what the actual title is. But just as a reminder, a part of what we have been working on is to have a position within the county system who serves as a liaison between the COC and the county to actually do the work in particular of the collaborative applicant. And that is the collaborative applicant on record with HUD. And so, like I said before, that has happened. The interview date is March the 19th. It's scheduled for all day. If my memory serves me well, I think we have 6 or 7 applicants that will be interviewed, and then we will get feedback from the county. The panel or the committee of individuals that are going to be doing the interviewing there are 2 COC board members that will be participating in that process. One is Bernita Sims with Welfare Reform Liaison Project, and the other is Shanna Reese with the Servant Center out of Greensboro. And there are 3 other members. One is the Stan Wilson with the City of Greensboro, and 1 staff person from, I think it's the Juvenile Detention Center with the county. And then the other individual will be Heather Skeens, who's the Director of Health and Human Services for the county. So we are moving forward with that. And then once that person is in position, then that individual will begin to work along with all the parties involved. Brian, did I leave anything out?
No, you did great. The title of that position is Continuum of Care Program Manager. So, well, I'll pick up where you left off, Dr. Palmer. In addition to the county's obviously played a huge role, in addition to the position, officially yesterday, they were able to register with the Housing and Urban Development as the collaborative applicant on behalf of the Guilford COC. That was no easy feat to get to that point, but we were thrilled that they were in the position to check the boxes. That has been confirmed, and so they will be in the official driver's seat to help navigate and facilitate the federal funding into Guilford County in that capacity. So that's critical. The county has stepped up in those 2 ways. I wanted to highlight just 2 other, I think, pretty important updates for this body to know. One is, and honestly, they both stem from, a lot of Dr. Palmer's work has stemmed from one task force called the Stronger Together task force, which has been pretty focused on keeping the COC intact as one body, which in large part, I think has succeeded. I think the fact that the county has played this role has been critical to that success. The other key task force of which one of your staff persons, Michelle McNair, is actually a part of, is called the Guilford County COVID-19 Homeless Response Task Force. I've been facilitating that task force for basically a year since COVID hit our community. And I wanted to just highlight two things. The first is that this gathering, and what it's done is it's facilitated and pulled together a network of shelter providers, city leaders, county leaders, funders, even healthcare supports. We have moved nearly, well, really at this point, over 1,000 clients safely into shelter in the past year. 1,000 clients. And we've been able to keep our COVID positive rate at 6%. That is a win. In that we were so afraid a year ago that this virus was really going to take a tough toll on our shelter system. Now, we've done that while our shelter system continues to operate at 50% capacity or less. And while that is good, what it's created is we have got folks now either awaiting shelter placement or folks in shelters awaiting housing placement. And I think one of our concerns that we want to put before you is to be thinking collaboratively in partnership, or what other ways we can work to help support our shelters, especially in High Point, who frankly their capacity is so tight. And we want to be in a place where folks can have a safe place to lay their head. So I want to sort of plant that seed. I don't know if this is the space, but maybe there's opportunity for us to talk further involving some of that shelter leadership, because one of our concerns, I'll give you one real example that just happened in the last week, is where there was some evictions that took place in Greensboro, and we had to quickly navigate how to get those placements either in our shelter system or housing. That took a lot of work on that task force effort, and I fear the same for High Point. You all have been great about giving us any heads up about potential evictions, but we really want to think more proactively down the road. Is what I say is we're moving from responding to COVID. I think we're getting closer to recovering. Not that COVID's over, but I think we need to be shifting that conversation to how do we recover from this. And so anyways, I just want to put that out there for future opportunity to be engaging your leadership and certainly the other key stakeholders in High Point. That's all I have, unless any of the city staff wants to add to
that. Thank you. Brian, could you give me that name of the second task force again? Is Guilford County COVID? What? I missed some of that.
Yeah. So the first one is the Guilford County Stronger Together Task Force, which Dr. Palmer leads. And then I've been leading the Guilford County COVID-19 Response Task Force.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other questions for the team? Thank you again. Thank you both for the update. And actually, some of that I do believe is pretty good news. Sounds like that Stronger Together task force is working out, and I'm grateful. Hopefully, we can kind of put this thing to bed after a while. But thank you both.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yep. And thank you. And normally I try to stay on for the rest of your meeting, but I'm going to sign off to head to another meeting. So thank you all again, and you all have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you too. All right, thank you. Next up is the discussion for Affordable Housing Tax-Exempt Bond Fund Project. And I believe this will be turned over to Mike McNair, Director.
Yes, sir. We're actually going to have a dual role here. The developer, Craig Stone from Winfield Properties, will be joining us virtually, and he's going to cover the first couple of slides, and then I'll finish it up. So, Craig, you there?
Yes, sir. Can everyone hear me okay?
Somewhat. We might have to tweak the volume a little bit. Can you try again?
Okay, how about now? Can everybody hear me okay?
Okay, yeah, you can go right ahead.
Okay, thank you to the Community Development Committee and council members present and staff members. Also Mike McNair and his staff in Community Development, appreciate it. As you know, I am Craig Stone with Winfield Properties. This is an extension of a number of the 9% tax credit communities that we presented over the years, starting with Admiral Point, Addington, Kirkwood, Hartley Bridge, a number of communities, Avondale, over the course of time. One of the first slides, I believe, is Wendover Heights that we are presenting. This is a larger transaction utilizing the 4% bonds that I think Mike is going to go into a little bit more in depth in his particular portion of the slides. But this particular site, some of you folks may know as it has moved through its process with zoning here of late, is one that allows for us to utilize the 4% vehicle to finance this particular community to produce more units. There's 216 units for families in the community. It's a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. I think that we're currently proposing 36 1-bedrooms, 108 2-bedrooms, and 72 3-bedroom units. Rents ranging in the probably low $500 range when you come to some of the DHHS folks and things like that that we'll be working with, up to as much as a little over $1,100. Those of course are not finalized right now. We're moving through the process, but affordable rents. We have submitted for this particular site an application in the preliminary round, the initial round for the 4% in January. The final application for this particular property will be submitted in May, and certainly a very competitive process this year in the 9% side. On the 4% side, competition is a little bit differently kind of configured, and we may have a better shot competitively in the process with this particular site. Our next site is 3023 North Main Street. This site is currently under contract. We have proposed in a similar fashion as far as the building design, architectural design, those types of things, up to 175 units with a similar breakdown related to 1s, 2s, and 3s on a percentage basis. We will also be targeting a similar rent structure. We're currently trying to finalize that right now. We will be submitting this particular site and possibly one other site that we are currently working on right now in the second 4% round. There is a second round that comes up in May and June of this year for the 4% that we are targeting for this particular application, and look forward to sort of moving through the process with that. Not sure if there are any questions at this point of me. I know that Mike has some other sides that have quite a bit of information, good information about the process, the credits, and the financing. Would like to present myself. If there's any questions I can help at this point. There's been quite a bit of time and effort put in to locating the sites that we have to hope that those would be competitive as we move through the process, and mindful of the city and its goals, and would look forward to any questions if I can answer any.
Questions, sir? Oh, and by the way, it's South Main, not North Main.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Well, we are looking for sites in North Main as well, so we'll wait just a little bit longer on that one and try to get something up there as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions for? Okay. All right. In that case, I guess you'll carry on. Mike, take the rest.
Yeah, I'm going to talk to you briefly about this whole concept of housing revenue bonds, kind of tell you what they are and what they aren't at a higher level. I'm not an expert on this. We bring the experts in later. But essentially, these are bonds that they call them tax exempt because the interest on the bonds are exempt from income tax from the IRS. It's a funding mechanism that's allowed by the state and by the IRS to issue these bonds. These are not GO bonds. These do not affect the city's credit rating. These are not debt to the city. The bond volume is actually coming from the state, but it has to be issued by a local entity. Again, this is, as I mentioned to you last time, this is the same type of funding that's being used in Daniel Brooks, where the housing authority is issuing those bonds. They're not taking on the debt, but they are the conduit for the bonds to come through. Again, this will be affordable housing. The HUD guidelines will apply. It has to be affordable to people at 80% or below, and there'll be a mixture in there that we haven't hasn't come to fruition yet. I guess that'll come up later, but it applies to the whole project. It's really, as Craig mentioned earlier, essentially same type of thing as the tax credit. It's just bigger, more units, just a different funding source. One of the things that's happened recently was that with the passing of the stimulus, I don't know which one it was, but the stimulus package back in December, there were adjustments in the legislation that fixed the 4% on the bond. It used to be market-based, and they were seeing a lot of, it would say 4%, but when you go out in the marketplace, it would be 3.1 or something like that. And so now the legislation is known it's fixed, it's 4% period, which makes a big difference when you're talking about projects of this size. So that makes it more usable for a developer. And frankly, it's good for us because on the 9% side, the tax credits that he was talking about, the competition is so fierce. And we're still kind of, we have our sister city next door who has all this bond money that they're putting out there. They're local bonds that makes it difficult to compete with them. So this gives us another opportunity to get affordable housing in the High Point and actually at a larger scale than we've had in the past. So as he mentioned, the first one is 216, the second one's 175, the third one I'm sure is well over 100. And it actually provides some opportunities for us to get some developments in places in the city where we wanted to in the past, but couldn't get them in there because of in fact, to get points for them being in a certified census tract. So down the road, we could see some of these sites you've asked me about before, we could see some development coming into the core city, which in the past we've not been able to do. So this provides a lot of opportunities for us. Basically, in this process, as he already mentioned, they've already submitted an application to the state. The next step would be for the city to issue what they call an inducement resolution, where essentially we would say to the state, we will issue the bonds if the project is approved. And that's something that we're working through time-wise. I know that we would come, your first meeting in May would be the target date for that, but I anticipate we'll probably have some type of briefing of some kind with you to give you more detail on what that's all about. And we're also, the management team is sort of working through some of the details of that. But there won't be a public hearing or anything like that until after the award is made by the state. And then we will be doing that as part of the actual issuing the bond. So initially it's kind of like a commitment letter. The initial resolution is sort of a commitment. We will issue these if you get funded. So, and I'm glossing over a lot of this stuff, but I anticipate that when we get together with you, I imagine it's probably going to be with the entire council, but there'll be an opportunity to go through all that stuff with somebody that can speak better to it than I can. Who are the players in the deal? You have the issuer, that's us. The purchase is going to be a private entity, a bank of some kind. Your bank is an underwriter. And, you just have those different players in there. One of the things to underscore again is, as we currently understand it, it is not a financial liability to the city. We're going to get confirmation on all that, but as our understanding, it's not a financial liability, does not affect our credit rating, does not affect our debt capacity. There's no callback in case there's a default, because that's between the developer and the state. Or kind of housing finance agencies. They're the ones that actually would release the funds. All the states in the United States are issued an allotment of these bonds based on their population. They call it a bond volume cap of some kind. And so right now there's actually probably more money out there than, it's the opposite of what you see with the tax credits. The tax credits, you get 200 applications for 30 projects. Just fierce competition on this side. And Craig, correct me if I'm straying offline here, but this is not near as competitive a process. And I dare say, if the numbers work, which they wouldn't submit it if they didn't, it's almost, I won't say a done deal, but pretty favorable. We would get that.
What's the, if you don't mind, I'm sorry to interrupt. What's the comparison of I guess the applicants that are like, is it a higher number of applicants that are passed on one side or the other? You compare the two different.
Well, these deals are pretty complicated, so you see a lot more applicants going for the 9% tax credits. On the bond side, it requires not only, it's a complicated deal, but you also have to have ability to control your costs to a degree that may not be on the other side. And Craig, you want to add to that?
No, that's correct. I mean, at the end of the day, whether it be 9% or whether it be 4%, they are a form of financing, and the equity that you're essentially bringing to the deal to be able to afford the affordable rent structure, those types of things, is ultimately multiplied by a factor related to the 9% or related to the 4%. 4%, obviously, as you factor that across, there's less equity that comes in, which means that it's a larger transaction to be able to carry your overhead costs, those kind of things. The competition is smaller on the 4% side. The deals are a little more difficult, a little bit more encumbering as far as the guarantees and those kind of things from the developer's standpoint. The competition with the bond allocation is a little bit easier to work because it is a barrier of entry that is a little bit more difficult. The 9% side is certainly something that's always going to be there, but the 9% side over the last number of years has become really competitive to the point of a very difficult sort of narrow window to be able to achieve success. So if we can work in the 4% side, which is certainly a more difficult side to work in, it allows us a little bit more sort of flexibility and a little more assurance as we move through the process that we might be able to bring something across the finish line for the folks in the community.
Thank you. Have they have they kind of compensated for the increased cost with the amount issued in the bonds? COVID, I call it COVID cost. I mean, because it just, stick of wood costs you a whole lot more now than it did last year.
Yeah.
Curious.
Funny you should mention wood. Wood was trading at $250 per board foot thousand last year. Roughly at this time now, it's over 1,000, highest in recorded history. We have, as best we can at this very moment, captured a lot of that cost. That cost is somewhat of a relative target right now. And as we're moving through the process, we're identifying that. We are also looking at rents and those kind of things and preparing for a final application. There is some talk, like for instance, with the wood, the futures have moved down 150 points last week to this week. And there is some hope, some light at the end of the tunnel related to that. But it is an ongoing item to be able to determine those costs, bond issuance, a number of different things. And we'll be, up to the point of application, studying those using historical reference of numbers that we've had in the past and those types of things to be able to submit an application that's, a winning application. And then as you move through the process, there are a couple of checks and balances there as well, where those items are looked at, reviewed, and then as you bring in other players, whether it be syndication, those kinds of things, the system has those checks and balances as well to review the process as a whole.
Thank you. I'll try not to interrupt again. Go ahead.
Well, as I said, these things are complicated.
Yeah.
That's why you have to kind of see them more than once. But the more you see it, the easier it is to grasp it. But I think I covered much of the highlights on that one. This slide presentation, by the way, came from, I didn't make this presentation. It was given to me by a law firm. I asked them if they had for my own illumination, I asked them if they had a tax-exempt bonds for dummies presentation. He said, no, we got one-on-one. I said, okay, I'll take that. And then I left some things out because they were pretty technical. I didn't want to put it up there. But I think we already talked about this, who the players are. You see this flow chart, the authority is us. You see in the middle there, the funds, once the bonds are sold, the funds come into the project as equity, as Craig mentioned. And then essentially, we're kind of out of it. We have to, one of the things that we have to do would be to, on an annual basis, we'd have to do monitoring type stuff, which we do anyway for all the other projects. So it's not a different setup for us. A lot of the other stuff happens outside of us. He has responsibilities to the bondholders, and of course the state is involved and whatnot. But once it gets rolling, we're not really involved in. There's no flow through to us. And then on this last one here, we asked what are the issues and responsibilities. As I mentioned earlier, we would have to adopt the inducement. I'm not sure why the word reimbursement is in there, but the inducement resolution basically, as I said, would say that the city of High Point would issue the bonds if the project was approved by the state. And then after the awards are made, then we'd have a public hearing sometime post-August or somewhere in that period, and go from there. And then there would, I guess the findings resolution would be coming through the law firm that would be representing us, and we would adopt it, and then you sign the documents, and the funds are issued from the state. But as you say, we will receive and review monitoring reports regarding compliance with income requirements. We periodically go to all the other developments and confirm that the people that live there are income eligible. So I mean, again, it's something that we do anyway. That's all I've got on it. I guess we'd like to gauge your support for us to continue to pursue this. This is, should we ask for a V?
Mr. Chairman, if the committee would like to forward a recommendation to the council to receive the report and any additional information, that would be appropriate.
All right. I'll take the motion to that effect. All right.
So moved.
Second. All right. It was motion in place by Councilman Wesley Hudson and seconded by Councilman Cyril Jefferson. I'll go ahead and take the vote. So Councilman Tyrone Johnson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson? And I vote aye. So that passes 4-0 in favor of.
Thank you. This is an opportunity, frankly, for utilize this financing to get more units on the ground in 1 year than we have since 2012. It's just the scale is much larger, and it's as you know, it's much needed. So it's something that we've been looking at for a while and talking with the developer about it for a while. And then once that change was made in the legislation, he said, hey, now's the time. We can do it now. And so we'll keep working on it. And I imagine at some point in the not too distant future, we'll probably ask the manager to do a manager's briefing to talk about it in depth and bring in the attorney to explain and answer any questions you may have with authority.
And I'm sure there are going to be more questions. And
Oh, yes.
I would hope that if Director McNair and our partner Winfield will keep your phones open, because you're going to get questions from council to kind of, because it does seem a little bit more, definitely more involved than the.
Oh yeah, this is more of a flyover just to give you, because I've been mentioned the last couple of meetings, so we're kind of at the point now where we're ready to start moving forward. So we needed to.
Thank you. I think I'm excited about it. I think as we work into the recovery from COVID and in place and trying to deal with the whole moratorium ending and so forth, I think it's just an opportunity to kind of help bridge the gap. Thank you, Mike, and thank you both. All right, next item up is an update from the Greater High Point Food Alliance. But Carl, before you start, I want to kind of go ahead and make a correction that falls upon this chair, and it's in discussion of the Greenway. It's item 2189. It was my intent not to have this up for this meeting. I have spoken to my colleagues, also Councilwoman Peters. This wasn't supposed to be here, and this was on me. It was because I'm still waiting to gather just a little bit more information, and I wanted to make sure staff has the time to get it to me. And I know this wouldn't have been enough time. It was not our intent to put it on the first meeting of the right after the month that it came to this committee. So I am removing that one item off of today's agenda. All right. Thank you. All right, Carl, I'll turn the floor over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Carl Veerling. I'm the Executive Director of the Greater High Point Food Alliance. And what I'd like to do is share a little bit about how the Food Alliance has responded. Can I take this off?
Yes, please.
Yes. Thank you. Michael, put his on real quick.
Yep.
But what I want to share is how we've responded to COVID-19 over the last 12 months. Food insecurity is one of the major areas that has really been impacted by the pandemic. Just to give you some background about some numbers, prior to the pandemic, North Carolina had a food insecurity rate of 12%. In April and May, a study was done that showed the food insecurity rate for North Carolina was 41%. And then High Point's food insecurity rate had been averaging around 24% on average. The Chamber of Commerce did a study this past fall that showed our food insecurity rate was 31%. So you can imagine the impact. Food pantries are seeing a doubling. It's finally started to level out and come down a little bit. But that gives you the background, the idea of what was going on. And so one of the things I've given you is a published summary of accomplishment. There's no way that we can capture everything that we've done in this presentation or in this document. So just quickly want to go through some of the projects that really came out of our response to food insecurity and the pandemic. The very first thing is we have been working on a capacity building project, meeting with local food providers to find out what their needs are so they actually serve more people within the community. And that really is anybody who is a food provider. It's senior meals, it's mobile meals, it's Meals on Wheels. It's whatever it may be as food is getting into the community. So you can see the number of groups that we worked with, the 24 different agencies. And these were meetings that we did in their facilities. We were looking at their process flow, at efficiencies, seeing what kind of needs did they actually have. A lot of this was about giving them suggestions on how they could improve their process and actually what they were doing. This has not been one of those times where we've been sitting in an office waiting for people to come to us. It really has been about being in the community and engaging. And kind of my philosophy in all this is how can we expect others to serve the community when we stay in the safety of an office? Now, I'm an old manufacturing guy at heart. If the plant's running, you're going to be there. And that really has been what we've been doing. So the funding for the capacity project, we received $50,000 for the Foundation for a Healthy High Point after a presentation to their board. So we put together a capacity building team that included Michelle McNair with the city, Ashley Bonner with Second Harvest Food Bank, Emily McCollum with the Weaver Foundation, and Janet Mayer, who just retired from the health department, and Rebecca Dobbins, who works for me. And so we were meeting on a weekly basis, and we took that $50,000 and leveraged it into $61,000. Because when we invited Second Harvest and the health department to come to the table, we didn't know they had resources to use on this project. So we were able to leverage what we were doing. And so you'll see the list of items that were purchased. One of the big impacts of COVID-19 on local food distributors and providers is the number of volunteers that can't come. So all of a sudden you have this great deal of need around moving material around moving stock. So we bought all kinds of different equipment. The other thing that was happening is that because of some of the programs of the USDA through Second Harvest Food Bank, the food pantries were getting a lot of food they didn't have any way of storing, especially refrigerated and frozen food. And so by doing this project, we actually allowed them or helped them expand the number of programs and people that they were actually serving. There were some food pantries that were not part of Second Harvest that have now applied to be part of Second Harvest. It has been just a tremendous program, and we are actually going into phase 2 of this with an additional $50,000. One of the things that has happened this past year is that we actually applied to become a disaster relief organization so that we could purchase emergency food boxes from Second Harvest Food Bank of Middle Tennessee. And the reason for doing that is that non-partner agencies of Second Harvest don't always have access to those food boxes. So we have purchased over 4,300 food boxes in the last 12 months. And you'll see the different groups that we've worked with. Guilford County Schools, we distribute over 1,500 food boxes to Guilford County Schools, to youth agencies in the community, the senior resources of Guilford, and independent food pantries like Burns Hill, the smaller food pantries that are not part of Second Harvest Food Bank. All of them have seen a dramatic increase. We were looking for ways to get food into the community where you might not normally get food into the community. A great example of that is the Hayworth Cancer Center. We worked with them in developing their food pantry and getting them food boxes through this program. Right after the pandemic came to light, the Condon Family Foundation reached out to us and said, how much money do you need? I didn't have an answer to that question because I've never been asked that question before. And so they sent us a check for $30,000. Within 7 days, that money was back into the hands of local food providers saying, use this however you need to use this. These local food providers were incurring expenses they did not have in their budgets. Supplies and disinfectants, hand sanitizer, all that type of stuff. So we were able to get that back into their hands within 7 days. We've also purchased through lots of different funding mechanisms, grocery bags and hand sanitizer and masks, things that these agencies need to make adjustments. Imagine going from serving people in your facility to doing drive-by food pantry work in the pouring rain. All of a sudden, you don't have the volunteers that you had before. We also worked to get a CARES Act grant through the county. We received $50,000, allowed us to purchase food. One of the groups that we purchased food for was High Point Community Against Violence. A lot of their folks are not eligible for food stamps because they're ex-offenders. And we're actually working on that at the state level and advocating that there would be a change. So for Thanksgiving and Christmas, we were able to provide fresh produce, canned and fresh meats, and at Christmas time, we got them pecan pies for that group, because they have needs just like everybody else. The other big group is refugee and immigrant population. A lot of them were being infected with the virus at meatpacking facilities outside of Guilford County, and then coming back home and just the structure of things were getting their family members sick. We used $10,000 from United Way to actually purchase culturally appropriate food. That meant going to the Indu grocery store on Eastchester, to the Southeastern Asian store on South Main, a Hispanic store. So a lot of the money that we have used has stayed in community. All the fresh produce came from Foster Cavanis, which buys from local farmers. The equipment that we were buying, as much as we could, we were buying from suppliers within the triad. We wanted the money to stay in community to impact our economy. We've also had an anonymous donor, I don't know who it is, who's been very generous. And with the funding they've given us, we've continued to buy more supplies and food boxes. We've also had the Food Security Fund for 2020. We continued with that. We gave out $24,000 in grants for that program. We're doing it again this year. Those programs continued. That's an investment in this community and sustainable projects. Just as a note of reference, since we started this with what we're doing this year, and Tyrone's on that committee, we'll have distributed over $100,000 in food security funds. And so that has been a tremendous impact to organizations and agencies that don't normally get funding, especially some of the smaller community gardens. We have the Food Finder app and the community resource guides. We have distributed over 1,500 community resource guides. That's the printed version of our app. The day you print it, it's out of date. We worked with Guilford County Schools, and Chris, you might remember this. On Sunday afternoon, I was texting you from GCS. And so we worked with them. All the Guilford County school feeding sites are listed on our app. Every one of them, we keep that up to date. Most everything we do is for the greater High Point community, but when it comes to the school system, we're working throughout the county. Well, in a 3-month period of time, there are over 2,300 downloads to the High Point Food Finder app. We've had almost over 4,000 downloads within the last 12 months. That's information that's going back into the community, because a lot of times people don't know where to go. We've had people come into the system that have never had to search for help before, ask for help. So the app has been a phenomenal tool in all that we've been doing. So some ongoing projects that we have taking place. We've got the capacity building project that we're continuing with. We're going to do a pilot project for North Carolina called Walk to the Store Day. We're going to work with one of our partner neighborhoods, and we're going to invite you guys and others to go walk to the store with us to see what it's really like to walk from, let's say, Highland Mills, to experience what it's like to go from that location to a local grocery store, and then actually bought food to carry back to the community, to the food pantry that's in that area. That's not been done in North Carolina. We received funding for that, so we'll do that in May. The Food Security Fund I mentioned, we've also been working for the last few years across the state of North Carolina to raise the awareness of food waste recovery, food waste reduction. A proclamation has gone to the governor's office for him to sign off on. The other thing that we've been working on is working with a group from across the state. We found that all 100 counties in North Carolina have different policies around food recovery. And so we've been working with North Carolina State, and they actually have developed standard operating procedures for food recovery. We've been working with the legislature to get $50,000 to fund that through Health and Human Services. I found out, unfortunately, today that they won't be able to do it through the COVID package, but we will be looking to get it to the state budget. So that $50,000 will actually return the state a few $1 million in recovered food, which is tremendous. The other thing that I'll mention that we're working on, we've commissioned High Point University, and we'll be doing a food security survey like we did 5 years ago to find out where we stand. A lot of questions around nutrition and education. What you don't see is all the work that each of the teams have done. The urban ag team, the food ed team, food access. They have been very innovative in getting information out, continuing food ed classes. So it has been a tremendous amount of work, and the neighborhoods have been phenomenal. I can't tell you what it's like to work with the 4 neighborhoods we work with. They're some of the poorest in the state of North Carolina. And Jerry Mingo shared in our last board meeting that he wouldn't have ever thought that a food pantry and a community garden would bring a neighborhood together, that they're seeing change. And you might say, well, what are you going to ask for? I know a lot of people come before you asking for something. I'm not going to. I just want your support. You know, as you're in the community, say, we've got this organization out there that if you find things that we need to be doing, please let us know. If there's a way of connecting resources, then we'll connect them. The one thing that the Food Alliance does extremely well is bring in resources and make connections. We've got people working together that 5 years ago didn't know each other. And it's not just in High Point. We've now connected to resources outside of our area in Raleigh and other places. Just to give you an idea, I was in Lansing, Michigan this time last year, and I was asked to meet with their food bank and nonprofits in Lansing. The work of the Food Alliance is being replicated in other communities. They're actually taking our food security fund and implemented it. There are a lot of good things. I'm not bragging because it's not me. It's all the folks that we work with. But in 6 years ago that we had our first meeting, we've come a long way. But there's a lot to be done now because of the impact of COVID-19. Doing a presentation on Thursday to a hospital foundation. The cost to our healthcare system is over $96 million a year due to food insecurity. When I was in the private sector, my boss asked me how I could save some money. I know some ways. I actually think that's a very conservative number. Based on the estimates where I think we are with food insecurity across the county, the number is closer to $130 million. So if I could tell this group we could save $130 million for our community, wouldn't you jump all over that one? So I appreciate your time. I really appreciate the support of this group. I'm always being asked, how do we get things done the way we get things done? It really starts with what has happened in this chamber and the work that you guys have done for us and supporting us. We have a lot of other communities looking at us and asking, how do you do this? And I always point to the city of High Point. So thank you for your time. I hope I've kept it brief enough. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions from the members? Carl, I'll tell you, you won't brag, but I will. I remember this organization, I think from maybe one of the first community meetings we had at the church. And I met you and, I knew Matt a little bit, but kind of got together with y'all. And that was one of the big ticket items that we were looking to try to address. And I don't think there's any way possible what's happened in our distressed areas without the Greater High Point Food Alliance, hands down. There is nothing in place like it. There hasn't been anything like it since. And the transformation in those areas, just from the impact of it, is more than just meeting the food needs. It's actually the joining of the community members that is real, and that is very real. And it went from me thinking, I don't know what these people are thinking, they're going to put a garden in that area and think it's going to get tore up the next day, to never happen. I mean, you have more threats from rabbits and stuff than you do from the people in that community when it comes to the community garden. So thank you so much. I can't say enough for this. And you know where I am when it comes to wanting support the Greater High Point Food Alliance. I sing its praises all the way to DC, and we'll continue to do that. And
if you get a chance, check out the Grodega that's being done by Growing High Point. They were in Burns Hill today. I went by and visited them in Burns Hill today. You get a chance, that's really, really excellent.
Yeah.
That's going to be a great program.
The mayor, did he do a ribbon cutting with that?
Yeah, that was a program that was funded
From the
this
seat,
past, yeah.
that came
They
from
used the funds to, I guess the truck was donated from the city.
From the
Yeah,
city.
yeah.
Yes, city.
And there were other fundings to upfit it, but yeah.
All right. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Mobile food market.
All right, that was the last item on the list since we made the change to the agenda. Is there anything from any other member? I will say this, one little quick, if you give me a second. I met with Catherine Johnson with the Family Justice Center of Guilford County. She's the director there. And she just gave me some information, kind of just trying to do a catch up. The information that she shared with us, I think it kind of has a two-part element to it. Some of it does need to go to the safety committee, and I'll speak with Chairman Vic Jones on that part. But I think some of it needs to be relayed here because they have the community connected elements like their summer camp for kids who are infected, traumatized, and then any other support, actually just the getting the information out when it comes to the victims of domestic violence. And it's more than that because they also cover like senior abuse, because it's not always that, somebody's actually physically hurting these individuals. They're taking advantage of them financially. You have the cons out there, and they're more susceptible to that piece. So I'm going to reach to Vic, but at the same time, I'm going to ask them to still come and give a presentation to this body, and that it gets relayed up to the whole body of council at some point. So I just want to kind of give y'all a heads up on that. And actually, my two good buddies, Randy and Jerron, if y'all will stay after, just want to kind of give you a little bit more information on that. So if there's nothing else, I will say we stand adjourned. Is there anybody has an objection to us adjourning?